I don't know about you, but I have had several moments of unexpected joy when I'm sat watching a TV show by myself or with my family, and suddenly, during the midst of everything, I hear a familiar song or melody in the soundtrack of the show that I'm watching. And so suddenly I'm not paying attention to the dialogue or the action going on screen. All of my brain power is being used to try and figure out exactly what it is I'm hearing. And sometimes this is frustrating, but there's an even added measure of excitement when I realize that the tune that they've used is by Status Quo. It's unexpected because it's not really a band, aside from, say, Whatever You Want or Rockin' All Over the World, that you expect to hear. And if you go back a few decades when they were more prominent in contemporary culture, 70s and 80s, you would hear tracks like Burning Bridges or Mess of the Blues in the background of shows like Only Fools and Horses. But in the last 10 or 15 years, there have been moments where I've watched a program and gone, where on earth did they have the idea to include it? And it's not because I think that it's not worthy of being there. Sometimes the selection is so random that it's just unexpected. It's like, where on earth did you find that? I remember about 10 years ago, I was watching the reality TV show Who's Doing the Dishes, and they had Josie Gibson, the presenter, on there. And suddenly I heard this tune, and it was Josie, a random late 60s recording by Quo that was pretty much unreleased until, the 80s. It was included on so many Pi compilations since then. And all I could fathom was that somehow someone in the production teams had a little look in the music library for something related, perhaps because the guest was Josie Gibson, found that song, went, I know who Status Quo are, a big band, not realizing the tune they're using is really obscure. But I'm not going to complain about it. It's great to hear them. Perhaps even more obscure, the better. Because how many times have we watched a TV show and it's Whatever You Want or Rockin' All Over the World? Even recently, and I think this further emphasizes, why it's so unusual, is that Down Down was played as a question of guess this song on the hit list very recently, and no one knew what it was, which really surprised me. And that happened again, actually, on a much later episode where Quo were played and they gave the wrong answer. They didn't sort of narrow it down. I think they said another artist completely. So, in the eyes of the general public and in the sort of commercial end of television, Quo were starting to kind of fall by the wayside. And then they appear in music form via Temporary Friend on Mortimer and Whitehouse's Gone Fishing. That was unexpected, random B-side, but it fits the narrative. I guess the only other time that I'm thinking of anyway, that they are included in things is when they want a period piece. The Power of Parker recently, they were having it was like a 1990 comedy drama on BBC One, 30 minutes long. Really funny. Go and check it out on iPlayer if you have access to that. What I liked about it was set in 1990, but a lot of the music was from the early to mid 80s. And I think it was a way to show the characters and how they weren't sort of the young spring chickens. They were a little bit older. And so you got Margarita Time during a party scene. Never thought I'd hear that. And there's that moment where it's like, wow, they've used it as a period piece to define, where they or the characters are. And again, I heard it in possibly one of the biggest shows of the last 5 years. And seriously, this is a huge show on BBC One called Ghosts, a British sitcom which was broadcast on BBC One from 2019 to 2023. It ran for 34 episodes over 5 series and several Christmas specials, and even when you turn on a Friday night, they often have repeat runs of it, because I've watched it at least 1.5, I'm sort of halfway through, times now. It's a very funny, silly, and, as we shall discuss, dark show, and I will explain how Quo fit into one of the narrative cornerstones of the programme. But first, if you're unfamiliar with Ghosts, perhaps you haven't seen it or it's passed you by, it was created by a collective called Them There, who are previously famous for Horrible Histories, which ran for many years on CBBC, and the Sky TV fantasy comedy Yonderland. They also created and starred in the 2015 film Bill, which is a very funny kind of historical comedy about William Shakespeare. Ghosts was their next project, and it concerns a group of ghosts from different eras who haunt a country house, which has recently been moved into by an heir to the house, and they're two young people who've moved in, and basically this the main sort of living character, Alison, has had a near-death experience, and she can see the ghosts, and so that brings about all kinds of fun adventures. Now, I'm sure that there are people of a certain generation who will say that sounds like Ghosts of Motley Hall or Rent-A-Ghost. And yeah, some of the subject matter does kind of cross over. And some of the themes and the stories, yeah, there are some similarities there. The most obvious one being there are ghosts that live in a house, but it isn't quite as comic book as Rent-A-Ghost, and it has sort of a more darker black comedy edge, because it was originally conceived as sort of a post-watershed comedy. It's very dark at times. It's black comedy. And I'm not usually a fan of these things, but I actually like it. I really love it. Like I say, I'm halfway through my second watch of it. And one of the features of the show, created by Them There and featuring the collective themselves, Mathew Baynton, Simon Farnaby, Martha Howe-Douglas, Jim Howick, Laurence Rickard, Ben Willbond, is that at least one episode is devoted to showing you either a facet of the ghost while they were alive or how they died. And like I say, it can get quite dark. The ghosts themselves range from a caveman all the way up to an early 90s politician with no trousers. But the ghost that I want to talk to you about, because this is where the Quo connection comes in. No, not the tribute band, although please do come on, Mick and Co. I'd love to speak to you again. But the connection to Quo is via the ghost Pat Butcher. Now, I will warn, if you haven't seen this, then go and watch it, because there might be a few spoilers here. Okay? So, Pat Butcher, not that Pat Butcher, not that Pat Butcher, played by Jim Howick. He is an early 80s kind of scoutmaster. And in the second episode, you see him giving an archery class outside of the country house known as Button House with a group of children. He accidentally gets shot with an arrow through his neck, I think, and he is then trying not to panic, basically. And what happens is he realizes he's the only adult. he has to drive the minibus. He runs frantically to the minibus. It's quite a gruesome scene. He runs to the minibus and he puts the key in the ignition and he turns it on. And you hear Francis Rossi and Rick Parfitt and co. singing The Wanderer. Can you guess which year this is supposed to be set in? 1984, October to be exact, which is why I'm talking about it here and releasing it in October. You hear The Wanderer as he's frantically trying to drive away to get help because he's got an arrow in his body. And he drives into a tree. And you hear Rick sing the line, "I go through life without a care." Bang. Now, if you're an American viewer and you're watching this, it's a different track that they use. I don't know why, probably because Quo aren't known, or someone in the American thing would probably complain that it wasn't Dion. Because in the American version, they use, apparently, Gold by Spandau Ballet. Apparently, as Tony Hadley sings the line, "You're indestructible," he hits the tree. But with me, I felt like the inclusion of Quo, aside from being a Quo fan, narratively makes sense. Because I feel like at another point, it's revealed that Pat is either a Quo fan or he makes a reference to Status Quo somewhere. And what you get to know about his character as the series progresses is that he is a very happy-go-lucky kind of a character. So to hear "I go through life without a care" just as he becomes a ghost is both funny and yet very poignant as well. And it was through rewatching it the other day that I realised, oh, wait a minute, they used Quo in this. I'd completely forgotten. And so that's why I wanted to tell you about it, because I thought maybe you don't know or you haven't seen it or caught it. It's a very funny but gruesome but kind of sad scene. And that's kind of the thing. I think when it first came out, all the comparisons to the previous ghost-related shows about ghosts living in haunted house. I mean, at times, Rent-A-Ghost was a cartoon, and Ghosts of Motley Hall is a lot more theatrical, I think, because of the era in which they made it. But Ghosts, at times, aside from being a sitcom and a comedy and, you know, like them, there's other stuff, very silly, there are also moments of kind of dark reality and like they go through like there's a lot of subjects being covered in each episode. But yeah, like I say, I heard Quo in that show and I was like, I think that might be one of the best uses of Quo, because you could kind of imagine, right, if he's got it on a cassette in the bus and he's taken the kids on this bus, they were probably singing along to it. Maybe he's got like 12 gold bars or something in there and they were singing along to all these songs, and then the Wanderer comes on and, you know, turns off, goes to do the lesson, gets hit, tries to drive off, and he's hearing Rick Parfitt. I mean, you know, and Francis Rossi there. It's a moment, and I think it only goes to demonstrate as well. And I've been recording a lot of episodes in batches, so you might hear me say this quite a lot, but Quo appear in popular culture more times than people realise. And this is one of those things, like Ghosts is a huge show. People absolutely love it. Me included. You know, I've watched it nearly a couple of times and I love the characters. I love everything about it. It's just a masterpiece in like sitcom television. It hasn't got a laugh track. It's more along the sort of more, you know, like The Office or something. You know, it's like a single cam rather than a multicam traditional sitcom, like Mrs. Brown's Boys. You know, it's not like that. And so, yeah, this is an iconic piece of television, or will be, and Quo are part of it. And I'm sure if you go back and look at TV from the past, I mean, the fact that they're forever immortalized in things like Only Fools and Horses, and now The Power of Parker, and other bits and pieces, not just wallpaper television, but stuff that's going to be watched for generations. And as long as the companies can continue to license that music, because sometimes music licensing stops an entire program from going out, but we now live in an era where they can take it out. As long as it keeps being licensed for that, depending on what the whole agreement was, we're going to hear Status Quo, The Wanderer, forever in this TV show for as long as BBC One or BBC iPlayer continues to show it. So, yeah, ramble over. Tell me, have you seen ghosts or anything else from the Them There collective, who are sort of like, I would like to say a modern day Monty Python, I guess, but I don't mean like flying circus. I'm not comparing like for like. I just mean a group of performers who perform together, write things, create things, and at times it's magic. Are you a fan? Let me know. What do you think of The Wanderer, which, funnily enough, along with Pat, 40 years this year. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you again for another episode of the Quo-Cast.